Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2022 stop motion animated film Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Leon for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would personally like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, this is a film that when it came out, it actually got a lot of accolades. I think it even won Best Animated Feature for that year's Oscars. And it's a movie that I definitely kept my eye on, but I didn't really get around to watching it until recently. And I think part of it is because I'm not really the biggest fan of the Pinocchio story. The Disney animated film was never one of my personal favorites when it comes to Disney animated movies. The story just really wasn't anything that I particularly loved in comparison to other fairy tales. But I was curious about this one because it was a very different, unique take on it. There were a lot of creative liberties that were decided upon by Del Toro when it comes to the storytelling and the way that he was going to tell his version and his vision of Pinocchio. And that definitely did intrigue me, as did the addition of stop motion animation, which is something that I really appreciate, especially when it's done well. And it is done remarkably well in this film. And I gotta be honest, I really like this. I wouldn't say that I thought it was a masterpiece, as some people make it out to be. I think it's got a few flaws that kind of hold it back from that status. But I will say that it's definitely one of the better films from 2022. I would say it's one of the better animated family films that have come out in the past few years. I'll take it over pretty much anything that Disney or Pixar has churned out as of late. And I would say this is my personal favorite adaptation of Pinocchio because it's so different, because it's so unique. It's not your typical retelling of the story. Del Toro makes it his own by having it set in World War II Italy, and it enables him to really explore a lot of themes and subtext that are very, uh, I wouldn't say near and dear to him, but definitely themes and subtext that he personally connects with because of his heritage. And this was just a really awesome challenge for Del Toro as well, because he hadn't really done a lot of animated films. He was more known for his work in live action, and he hadn't really done a lot of kids movies either. Del Toro was not really a director who was known for that kind of thing, doing animated films for younger audiences or for families. And he was able to jump into that particular pool and do a great job. I thought his direction in this, alongside Mark Gustafson, who also co-directed the movie, was magical. It really was. This is a really well-directed animated film with a lot of variety of different angles and perspectives and pans, zooms, different ways to really showcase the stop motion effects. It's a very visually pleasing film. It looks great to the eye. There's a lot of things that really catch your eye visually. The direction does a really good job putting a spotlight on certain things in terms of working with lighting and so on. With stop motion in particular, when it comes to animation, lighting is very paramount. It's very important because if you aren't lighting the stop motion maquettes or the puppets correctly, then they tend to look exactly like that. They just look like it's fake. It doesn't really have that immersive quality that you can get with stop motion animation without the usage of the right amount of lighting or the right way to set up the maquettes or the puppets in a certain scene. And there is a certain artistry and a wonder to stop motion that is not replicated with CGI or with any other form of animation. And I think honestly it has to do with the fact that they're working with the real parts. And when you're shooting something like this that's so meticulous and so relying upon handcrafted and physical materials, there's a certain care and attention to detail that you really have to do in order to make a effective and a well made and a good looking stop motion animated film. Otherwise, you can have something look kind of like, something that somebody made for just a home movie, which that has a certain charm to it as well, but that's not the kind of thing that you really want out of a film like this that is chock full of just so many just mesmerizing visuals. And there's just a lot of energy to it as well, especially with the character of Pinocchio and the way that Pinocchio is animated. So, yeah, it's a film that definitely does feature some just phenomenal, fantastic direction by Del Toro and Gustafson. Like I think both of them just worked really well with one another and just created a film visually that is right up there with the best of the best when it comes to animated fairy tales. The screenplay by Del Toro and Patrick McHale, based on a story by Del Toro and Matthew Robbins. For the most part, I think it's really good, especially when it comes to the different twists and the different elements that this adaptation adds into the fray. I really like the fact that they changed the setting. Now it's taking place in World War II, Italy. I also like the backstory that's provided for Geppetto. It really makes Geppetto as a character so much more relatable, and also at the same time so much more captivating. There's a lot more compelling elements to his character now, because you instantly sympathize with him when it comes to the loss of his son Carlo. And it really adds a different nuance to the creation of Pinocchio that I really liked. He created Pinocchio because he was trying to replace his son who died in the war, who died during a tragic bombing raid. And he did it when he was drunk and he was distraught after years of grief. And I also like how the cricket character is incorporated into the story. It's different, it's unique, it's a nice take on it. It's not just the same Jiminy Cricket thing. The cricket actually has a home inside of the tree that Geppetto uses to build Pinocchio. The cricket is tasked with teaching Pinocchio how to be good by the woods sprite that brings Pinocchio to life. And so there's a certain connection now that the cricket has with Pinocchio and Geppetto and other and just the story in general, which is really nice. And I like that the cricket is narrating the story. I think that fits. And I think the cricket is definitely one of the best characters in the script to me. Like, honestly, I would say the cricket is my favorite character, Sebastian J. Cricket. Um, but Geppetto and Pinocchio, they're not too bad either. I like that you don't have the same sort of stuff involving the antagonists here. You do have a whale, but it's not your typical whale. It's like this weird deformed creature. It's just this disturbing looking sea creature out of Terry Gilliam's nightmares. I really like that. And there's just a lot of nice little twists and just changes to the story that I really liked, like the stuff with Pinocchio and how he's immortal and how each time he dies he goes to the afterlife and he has to spend a certain amount of time with this death spirit of sorts, which looks a lot like a sphinx, and he has to spend time with this sphinx and wait for the hourglass to go out, and when it goes out then he can go back to yeah, it's literally death. That's what it's called. There is no other term for it. But it was just a nice, unique look and just setting for death. You don't really see that very often. It was very creative in terms of the way that it showcased the afterlife. And there's just a lot of creativity when it comes to this script that I really did appreciate. And a lot of heart too. There's a lot of heart here, and it came across as genuine too for the most part and not something that was forced. I even liked how certain side characters like Spadazura had an arc where this monkey that is being abused and is essentially a slave of this carnival uh, barker, this ringmaster, Count Volpe, uh, throughout the course of the film becomes more independent and ultimately breaks away from Volpe and helps Pinocchio. I like how there's a lot of those storytelling beats throughout this script that really focus on character depth and arcs for characters, even like I said, side characters like Spadazura or Candlewick, who is the son of Podesta, who is this fascist who is just obsessed with pleasing the whims of Mussolini and not being a coward and being a soldier and winning the war. And I like what's going on with Candlewick and his arc and how he stands up to his father by the end of the movie. And I like the dynamic between him and Pinocchio that forms when they spend some time together at the camp where you have these youths that are being trained for war. And there's some nice satire here in terms of politics and just the Italian fascist uh, um, parts of Italy's history, and you just have a lot of really solid building blocks here. Like it's a really solid script. It's as solid as a really nice sturdy piece of wood. But there are a few cracks. For one, I think there are some moments where because there's all these different subplots and all these different sort of things that are going on, it can kind of become a bit convoluted at times, a bit messy. There is a good chunk of the movie where Geppetto and the cricket are not even involved in anything. They're just trapped inside the sea beast, and it almost is the point to the point where you forget that they're even in the movie. I don't think that was really the best choice there. I think they could have cut back to them doing something inside the sea beast at least, instead of just completely going away from them for at least 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes. Um, I also feel that there are some moments where the tone of the script is a bit off because you have these jokes and these jovial moments and these scenes that are straight out of a Disney movie or a DreamWorks picture or something, and then you have some really heavy political stuff and elements involving the war, and you have the ending of the movie, which is just really bittersweet and depressing as hell. With Pinocchio outliving everybody that he cares about, and it's just one of those things where I get where the writers are trying to go with this, but it just becomes something that is a bit of a distraction sometimes when it comes to like the tone of the film. It's trying to be this family film, but it's also trying to be a movie with a lot of deep themes and subtext. And at times, that can be a bit too heavy. It really can. Sometimes the emotion can really kind of drag the film down a little bit, make it not as much fun and as enjoyable of a watch because it's kind of trying a little bit too hard to root itself in reality. Um, but yeah, other than those things, I think it is. It's a really solid script. It's a screenplay that definitely has a lot of sturdy elements that really do build a good foundation for a genuinely a good story. The voice cast is amazing. Like this is a for the most part. There's one particular performer who I'm not quite as big on, but for the most part, it is amazing. I mean, it starts with Ewan McGregor as Sebastian J. Cricket. He's the narrator of the story. He's also Pinocchio's like guide and conscience throughout the movie. He also, to me, has the funniest moments in the film. I loved Ewan's take on this character. I thought he did an excellent job. He's very charming, and it was just a lot of fun to hear Ewan McGregor bring this cricket to life. David Bradley as Geppetto, though, this is not a very popular opinion, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I felt he was the weakest performer in this voice cast, and it's not to say that he did a particularly terrible job. I don't think he was awful, but I did feel that he was more inconsistent with his voiceover work than other people in the cast. A lot of the time, it felt like he was being a little too gruff with the character, and it made the character come across as a little too one note for me in terms of the voiceover. And there were other moments as well that I felt like I could kind of hear him straining a bit. And that's not what you want out of an animated film. You don't want to hear the voice actor kind of straining and just trying as hard as they possibly can to emote. It really did felt like he was at times trying to overcompensate because he's doing voiceover instead of doing regular live action performing. So yeah, it's just one of those voiceover performances that was just very mediocre to me. It was just kind of in the middle and inconsistent. Not terrible. There were some moments where it worked, but then there's other moments where I didn't think it worked that well. Um, Gregory Mann as Pinocchio, I thought he did a magnificent job, especially when it comes to what Pinocchio is supposed to be. Pinocchio is supposed to be this overly exuberant, honestly oblivious child. And I feel that Gregory Mann really did handle that uh, very well and just added a certain amount of charisma too. Like you bought it. Like it didn't seem like he was trying too hard or anything. It felt and it came across very genuine, very authentic, as if it really was like the voiceover of a uh, bunch of wood that was brought to life and is just experiencing reality and life for the first time. Like it really did provide just a really good balance of those elements that make Pinocchio such a potentially interesting character. There was some good amount of humor to that he brought to the voiceover, and even some humility at times, some humbleness. Starts out kind of obnoxious, but then as the film goes on, Pinocchio gets more and more experience with the world and how it is, and the voiceover evolves along with Pinocchio. and that's what you want out of a performance like that. Christoph Waltz as Count Volpe, he was having a blast. He was having a ball playing the villain. He's really good at this kind of stuff. He was conniving, he was dastardly, he was devilish when he had to be, and of course, he was as charismatic as ever. Really brought that character to life in honestly quite memorable fashion. I thought Count Volpe was another one of the members of this film's cast that was really quite striking because of what Christoph Waltz was able to do with the voiceover. And speaking of striking, like Tilda Swinton as the wood sprite and as Death, I thought she was terrific. Both of these characters, they're not in the film that much, but man, did she really make the most out of a little here. Very just ethereal, beautiful, mysterious, just some really spectacular voiceover work by Tilda Swinton as these characters. Like I could honestly listen to her read the phone book as these characters, and I would be just as captivated by it. Cate Blanchett, I guess she voiced Spatazura. Uh, okay, like did she? Is it just her voicing the moments where the monkey is doing the voiceover for the puppets? Or did she actually make monkey noises too? Was she also like, oh, ah, ah? I mean, maybe she did. If so, that's one of the more impressive performances. If she was the one that was also making all these kind of noises and all this other sort of stuff, sounded pretty convincing. She did a good job sounding like a monkey. Um, Ron Perlman, he's also in this as Podesta. Um, he basically it was just Ron Perlman being Ron Perlman. He kind of stood out a little bit. Like he did a good job portraying the character as he is, as a cold-hearted snake. Really, he's just a really just awful kind of person, and he doesn't really care about anything other than doing what he feels is right for his country and impressing Mussolini and being the best soldier he can be, and to the detriment of the relationship between him and his own son. But it was a typical Ron Perlman kind of voiceover role, just pretty much the same emotion in every scene, and it was fine for what the character was. The character is strict, so it was fine, but it really wasn't anything that stood out in a considerable way. Finn Wolfhard is another one where he was fine too as Candlewick. Um, John Turturro, he voiced a character named Dottore, a doctor at Geppetto's village. Tim Blake Nelson, he voices the Black Rabbits. Tom Kenny, he voices Mussolini. Yeah, that's crazy. Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants, voiced Mussolini in Pinocchio. SpongeBob, fascist dictator Mussolini. Okay, all right, that's quite the contrast. But he was fine for what he was tasked to do. But yeah, it was for the most part a really good voice cast. The cinematography by Frank Passingham, it definitely passed the grade and then some. Really nice looking film, especially the scenes involving the wood sprites or death. Those sequences are just visually breathtaking. And the editing by Ken Stretzman and Holly Klein, I also really liked. I thought it just added so much more to the movie. Editing is so paramount and so important when it comes to a good, little and great stop motion film. Even more so than like regular animation, because you have to kind of cover up some of the elements of stop motion, make things flow, uh, uh, and not have moments where things look choppy and kind of jerky, because that can kind of happen with stop motion. So the editing has to be uh, uh, a lot more seamless at times to really uh, not expose the limitations or the worst elements of stop motion as an animated medium. and the editing here was just excellent, like just really really top notch. And the music by Alexandre Desplat. The original score is fine. It's not anything fantastic, but it works for the movie and what kind of emotion certain scenes are trying to evoke, or uh, scenes that are supposed to be a little bit more tense or exciting. The original songs, though, they were pretty weak. I would say that's definitely one area where the Disney animated movie from back in the day did a better job with the songs. A lot of the songs here and the compositions, they just sounded very similar, like almost too similar. Like there were moments where there was one song and then you heard the next one and it almost sounded like they were in the same key, or they just had the same composition except for like one or two notes were changed, and it just led to a lot of the musical numbers and a lot of the moments involving songs just not really being that special and just kind of being there, just serviceable at best, but at other times not even that, because the vocal work was distractingly fake sounding. Like the first musical number in particular with Geppetto, like you could tell that the actor who was playing Geppetto either isn't the best singer, or they did something in post to really make his voice have a lot of auto tune or reverb, and it just sounded off. And there were other musical numbers like that where it just sounds off. Like there's too much tinkering that was done in post processing with the audio, or they're using a lot of auto tune to compensate for certain uh, voice actors' lack of singing ability, and that was unfortunate. It's almost to the point where maybe you didn't even need the musical numbers, and other than the bits at the carnival, you kind of didn't. I didn't really feel the musical numbers really added a whole lot to the movie. The best singer to me was Ewan McGregor, and there was this whole running gag of him trying to sing a song throughout the movie and was never able to finish it until like the end of the movie, where he sings during the end credits. And he could definitely have some pipes, but the rest of the voice cast, not on the same level, that's for sure. Uh, yeah, it's just one of those movies where, yeah, it's a musical at times, but the music numbers are just kind of thrown in there, and it's almost like they're in the movie just because it's a Pinocchio film and it's a movie for families, and it just feels like it's something that they have to put in there, that Del Toro has to put into the film, and it doesn't necessarily feel like he wanted to. It just feels like very much an obligation kind of thing. Like, oh, it's an animated film for families. I got to have some musical numbers in there. But other than stuff like that, and maybe like a couple moments where the pacing is a bit off, like I said, there are moments in this movie where it starts focusing on some other sort of subplot, and it's not really as engaging as scenes that involve other characters that you really have grown to care about more. For instance, when Pinocchio winds up in the military camp, I like the idea of him developing a bond with the the son of the fascist soldier, Podesta, the government official. But it does come across like it's kind of random, and the two really weren't that connected. In fact, the kid literally tried to kill Pinocchio early on by having him light himself on fire. So when you have this scene where the two bond with one another, it does come across a bit forced. I do like the fact that that's there. It does add some more intriguing depth to the character of Candlewick, but at the same time, it doesn't feel as earned as I feel it could be if you like soften some of the edges of Candlewick early on in the film. And when you're dealing with that, you're not focusing on cricket and Geppetto and them trying to get out of the sea beast. And it's just one of those things where maybe they just felt like, oh, what else can we do here? I don't know, have them explore the stomach some more, have them try and fail to escape a few times. Something. Because I just wasn't really as captivated by Pinocchio just going on these random journeys where, oh, he'd be going he's going with the carnival, and he decides to ruin the big moment for Volpe and humiliate Mussolini. Then he gets shot by Mussolini. Then he comes back to life. Then he goes to the military camp. And that stuff just wasn't as engaging to me as the stuff involving Geppetto or the cricket. So I feel that there should have been a better balance of Geppetto and the cricket trying to get out of the sea beast, and Pinocchio and his continued journeys. And I think that definitely would have helped the pacing of the film. But despite some issues, despite some things that I didn't feel were quite up to the task, or living up to the full potential of the story, I was relatively satisfied by this adaptation of Pinocchio, and I would highly recommend it. I really would. I think it's definitely worth a watch, just for the animation alone, just for the stop motion animation, because it's a sight to behold and then some. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.